Welcome to When Leadership Turns into Bullying.
Hello, everybody. This is Vernon and Emuang from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, on the Speaking Up Network, together with founder Animah Kosai and one of our pioneering members, Chevonne Hassan. And we are here this week to talk about a topic that is very much in sync with what the week is all about. And the topic is when leadership turns into bullying. Okay? When leadership turns into bullying, brought to you by the Speaking Up Network. And here to explain to us the meaning behind this title, as well as what the week is all about, is founder and driver of the Speaking Up Network, Animah Kosai. Over to you, Animah.
Thank you, Vernon, and thank you, Chevonne, for that lovely opening as well. My name's Animah Kosai. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that my two colleagues here, Vernon and Chevonne, are in a storm, literally, right? I understand there's thunder and lightning in Kuala Lumpur at the moment, so hoping that they're okay. So this is why we've switched to audio, because it was going to make the video very difficult under the current situation. So, but I'm in a colder and calmer place in Nottingham in the UK. So, Workplace Bullying Awareness Week is something that's been going on for a number of years now. And it first started by Gary Namey, who's in the United States, and he is the founder of the Workplace Bullying Institute. And then it was taken up to a really global level by another associate of mine, Linda Crockett, who is in Alberta, Canada, and she incredible. I think both Chevonne and Vernon know her as well. She runs the International Workplace Bullying Resources Institute, and I would say is really her together with Gary are incredible experts on what workplace bullying is, and also issues around that, which is also how do you report bullying, how do organizations support people who have been bullied from a trauma-informed response. So definitely check them out. The other thing as well is that at the moment there's hashtag Workplace Bullying Awareness Week, and there's a number of us all around the world. I think there's almost 40 countries involved, and I guess this one is more of the Malaysian British side, but also we consider ourselves global because the Speaking Up Network is we have people all around the world, right? And I would say all 6 continents as well. So that's wonderful. And when leadership turns into bullying, what we wanted to talk about, this was really, I'd say, prompted by something that I posted on LinkedIn on Sunday, where I shared examples of workplace bullying. And half of those bullying examples actually are connected to leadership. And quite a few people kind of were quite, oh, this is more covert. We didn't know this was bullying or harassment, right? So this is why we want to talk today about how quite a number of what I call leadership traits can very easily tip into bullying, especially probably the older style of leadership, which we hope is changing today. But the 3 of us have been talking, and along with other people as well, a lot of these sort of leadership traits are normalized, and people are told, well, this is how the working world is, so deal with it. So we wanted to unpack some of that, because what we want to see is that leaders become aware of how some of their behaviors can be harmful. And they will need to change it if they still want to call themselves leaders. So I'm going to stop there because we want this to be more like a fireside chat, right? Vernon, Chevonne, you want to add anything?
Thanks, Animah. Thank you, Vernon. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. I'm in Kuala Lumpur. I'm from Kuala Lumpur. And the approach we're taking today, Animah, Vernon, and I, is just to have a fireside discussion. And yes, Animah, it sparked from your post. And then you were inspired to create this event for us to speak about when leaders either intentionally or unintentionally borderline into bullying and what it means. I know I have been, I want to say a bully. No, let me rephrase that. I have been a bully before myself. And one very live instance is, so to give context, the team I was leading, I encouraged everyone to call each other out. When I say call each other out, if someone's doing something that isn't ethnically right or isn't aligned with the company's values, we respectfully and politely call each other out. And this one time in a team meeting, I said something. I just made a comment, and honestly, I thought it was harmless. In my head, it was harmless. It came out so naturally. And one of my team members said, hang on, I thought we're not supposed to say things like that because it's not aligned. My immediate feeling was, how dare you? Because that's when my ego kicked in. And then I realized, oh gosh, I appreciated the fact that she called me out, and I apologized to everyone after that. So if the person had not done it, I would have probably continued to do it. And that's one instance, I believe, in bullying or in curbing bullying, it can really help. So it's when people just respectfully and politely call each other out and say, hey, that's not polite, that's not right. You could say it this way instead, and then give the alternative as a suggestion. That would be my take so far, Animah. What about your experiences?
Well, I love that. I mean, thank you, Chevonne, because I think I'll put my hand up too. And I've been bullied at work as a young lawyer, and then I became a bully too. And I think this is because I thought that's how you lead. As being in law firms and the way in those days, I think it's still the case. Law firms work. It's a tough environment, and basically the understanding is that, well, we want to toughen up young lawyers so that you can stand in front of harsh judges or in front of difficult clients and you can take it. So we, the older lawyers, will treat you in such a way so you get used to that behavior and you know how to stand up for yourself. So it's the toughening up approach. And my thoughts, I mean, this is what I thought was okay then. I thought that's how leaders are, right? And it kind of took, I mean, like, we'll talk about micromanaging in a while, right? But I had been micromanaged and I was a micromanager as well, right? And the other things I would do is, I would make sarcastic remarks. So I'd write in red pen, see me, like a teacher, on drafts and things like that. And it was only when I moved into the oil and gas industry, which is very different. And my first boss there said to me, I don't know how it works in law firms, but, in this company, this is not how we behave. And then I went through leadership training. It's like, ding, light bulb went off, and it was such a relief because I realized that the environment I had been working in before had normalized certain behaviors, which made all of us feel really unhappy, but we felt, oh, this is the working world. This is how it is. And it was only when I joined, multinational oil and gas company that I discovered, there is actually a nicer way to work, which is more enjoyable. And it's about respecting each other as well. And you don't have to be harsh to other people and all that. There are ways of leading which may initially feel counterintuitive. So I learned how to coach people as opposed to telling or ordering them what to do. And it was so much more delightful, as a boss, as a team member, as, in that style. It was so much more fun than having, a team report to me and me just giving them instructions. And I think that's an old style of leadership, which really doesn't get the best out of people, in terms of creativity, innovation, and people being able to actually point out, like what you just shared, so people can speak up to you and say, Animah, that's not a good idea, or you've just made a mistake, or, so that they can give you feedback which is beneficial either to your own, personal behaviors or to a direction that you're about to go, a decision that you're about to make in terms of the business, right? So this is where we feel that leadership is very important in a way that it doesn't tip into that bullying thing because the impact it has on your team. And I guess we can give, some examples of what that looks like. Chevonne, Vernon, you want to add anything there?
Hi, Animah. Thanks. Yeah, just a little bit of advice that my voice isn't very good today, but I'll try my best. Yeah, with regards to bullying, I'd like to just, how shall I say, thank the both of you for admitting to the fact that once upon a time, you were bullies and you had to come around to some realization of what was going on. I, too, have been a bully in the workplace. And yes, it's so easy to fall into the trap where you think you're being firm, where you think you're trying to toughen up your subordinates and your team members, and you do not realize that perhaps maybe you're putting more pressure than what they can deal with. And of course, as I admit to having been a bully at work, I would also like to uh, bring attention to the fact that I've been in situations where I've seen bosses who were bullies in their own rights. And yes, it's really important to call out the behavior. It needs a level of different kinds of approaches to figure out what will work best without creating an atmosphere of, how shall I say, something that's, it should be constructive. And I think perhaps, with both of you in the corporate training space, it would be great to hear some tips as to how to call it out in a way that will have the most positive and most constructive outcomes. Because sometimes people don't even realize they're doing this damaging thing to other people. Yeah. I'll end here.
Yeah.
Chevonne?
Okay. Chevonne.
Thank you so much, Vernon. That was a really good share, and that's a really good suggestion as well to share an example. So I can share an example of when I was bullied, and I can share examples of what is visibly noticeable for us to see, because a lot of the times I believe that what has been quote unquote normalized is bullying can be seen. And this isn't always the case, because sometimes bullying is not visible to everybody. And when the lines are so blurred, we cannot tell that it's even considered bullying. So when I was working in corporate, one of my managers used to tell me, when it came to task-related stuff, he used to tell me, you know what, I get paid to think, and you do what I tell you to do. What that immediately did to me was I felt completely dismissed, and I started shutting down bit by bit. I'm generally opinionated, and I'm outspoken. So I started becoming very quiet. And what happened at work one day was one of the reports for one of the projects it backfired. Things just didn't go well. And the boss pulled me aside, my manager pulled me aside and said, why didn't you ask me anything about this? And so bear in mind, everyone who's listening to this, this was at a time when I was less tactful. So I was very direct with my response to him. And I said, well, you were very clear with your instruction and direction to me. You get paid to think, and I do what you tell me to do. And that does not involve thinking. And he was flabbergasted. He just stood there speechless. After that meeting was over, he pulled me aside and he said, I didn't realize that you took it literally. I just thought it was just for that one instant. So we spoke about it, we cleared the air, and things were okay after that. I would say in a workplace organization, when employees start to get more and more quiet, that's a red flag. Especially when employees who typically come to work chipper, they're happy, they're social. If you start seeing and noticing less and less of this, it is a red flag. something is happening, be it the person is feeling unsafe, something has definitely happened. So I would say that is one indication. To be able to create an actual safe space for employees, and what I mean by this is, I know that collectively, globally, across many different organizations, we speak about creating a safe space. The reality is that not many people actually know, what does this sound like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how is this to be replicated across the teams, across the departments, and then in the long run, across the entire organization? So those would be two of the suggestions that I have. When we start to create a safe space for people where we don't just tell them, and communication is not just one way, we intentionally make it a point to listen, not judge, but to listen, it could be one of the steps to start curbing bullying. That's what I have so far. Back to you, Animah and Vernon.
Thanks, Chevonne. I mean, listening to that, I can't help but feel like there's been certain environments and behaviors that are normalized, and people, it's almost like we've been gaslit, right, into believing, oh, well, this is how the working world is, especially for young people when they first go into the working world, and then thinking like, they get really excited, right? Or when we join companies, new companies for the same time, you're so full of purpose, and you're motivated, and you think of all the things you can do, and then you go in, and the first thing that happens is people cut you down to size, like, uh, and make you feel small. And I think, whether it's colleagues, middle managers, even leaders can do that. So the example you gave, Chevonne, of this leader saying, well, uh, you're not paid to think, or something like that. I mean, that to me is like I think a lot of leaders, and myself included, also throughout my career, have made these kind of very cutting remarks. And it was a very sarcastic remark that I made in my first week in the oil and gas industry that kind of got me into invited into the general manager's office, and he had a conversation with me, like, because I this with this remark I had made, this lady who reported to me, I'd made her cry, and I didn't know I'd done that, until it was told to me, that she was found in the ladies in tears because of what I'd said. And of course, I think a lot of us as leaders, we don't set out to deliberately want to hurt people. We don't wake up in the morning and go, well, who am I going to make cry today, right? We don't even think of ourselves as bullies. But if we're not careful and not mindful of how we speak, we could easily do that, right? And this sort of borders whether we talk about bullying or harassment, and even, especially in sort of the talks and the conversations I have with clients, is like around, let's say, women at the workplace. And there was a McKinsey and Lean-In just did their Women in the Workplace 2023 report recently, and the very first thing that came up in that report, because they were talking about the 4 myths about women in the workplace, right? The very first one was microaggressions is anything but micro, and the debilitating effect it has on women, and especially even worse for women of color, even worse for LGBT women, even worse for disabled women. The treatment they get. So I'll give you some examples, and I'm going to share this in another LinkedIn Live at 1:00 my time with Elliot Ray. I mean, one of the examples is, for example, questioning someone's judgment, and we see this most commonly. Women are questioned for their judgment when they give an idea or an opinion. Young people, so like somebody older would say to them, well, are you sure? You've just graduated from school. What do you know? And so, as I said, when you first start and join a company, you're so excited, and you're cut down to size in this way. What it does is make you start questioning yourself. Oh, maybe they're right. And you start questioning your own judgment. So this McKinsey report said that they called it the broken rung, and you've probably heard that before, that women, for example, face, is that when you're told over and over again your judgment is questioned, You have other people taking credit for your ideas. You are constantly interrupted and spoken over in meetings or elsewhere. These are actually forms of, whether we call them microaggressions, even bullying. The impact is to dismiss you, to not listen to you. And so you end up feeling like, well, I'm obviously not good enough. I can't do this job because that's what everyone's telling me. And that actually is a form of bullying. And I would say that, for those of us who are leaders, we need to be really mindful of the things we say and do, which shut down the people who report to us or work with us. And even for me, it's a constant, even today, it's a constant learning experience. It really means having some element of self-awareness. And I think one of the things I wanted to talk about, because what I shared in my post on Sunday, the more covert forms of bullying, which people have normalized and think, oh, well, that's how leaders are. Micromanaging, right? And that came out with a client this morning. In terms of, is micromanaging bullying? That was a question that was asked of me. And my response was, actually, it can be. Because imagine if, you're delivering a piece of work, you give it to your boss, your team leader, whoever, and they come back and they want to change every other sentence. They want to, and when you want to, let's say, communicate with another colleague or a client, you need to go through them and they have to confirm everything first and all that before. And it kind of, if there's too much of that and it's constant and you're constantly corrected and you can't even, put one step forward without having to seek permission, that's micromanaging. And you cannot grow, in a company when every step of the way is being doubted or watched over and all that. And some people, so-called leaders, managers, do that. And they do that probably because they're very insecure, they're very insecure, or two, that's how they've been treated and they think that's what it is. And going back to my early law firm days, where I would actually, because I was trained as a lawyer to look at every single word, right? And I did in agreements, right? I was a corporate lawyer. And then I started doing things, the same thing to lawyers who reported to me. And I realized, actually, it's really disempowering. It's like I don't trust them. But I didn't feel trusted. So if you're a leader and you're already sort of showing that you're not trusting them because they're questioning every step they make, how are they going to grow with you, right? So I would say that's micromanaging is a form of bullying. I'm just wondering, Vernon and Chevonne, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this concept of micromanaging, because my background is in the creative industries, advertising, public relations, media, event management, and in an event management kind of like a situation, it's really highly stressful, and there are so many small little things that you really have to have your eye on. You need to be an octopus. You need to have eyes around the back of your head to be able to notice. And I've often felt that it is in those kinds of situations, highly stressed out, when micromanagement can become quite a thing. And so when I used to run my little agency doing event management, I would prep the teams to remember that we all wanted the same thing, which was a flawless event to take place. And I guess leadership, to try and avoid, how shall I say, to try and avoid getting people into bully situations, right, is to remind all of us that we are really there to look out for each other. Because sometimes the micromanagement can be seen as harmful. And sometimes the micromanagement is so necessary. I don't know what kind of like throwing a spanner in the works of what we've been discussing, but I think it's leadership basically sets the context. sets the context so that certain behaviors not can be justified, but we all kind of like, how shall I say, become a little bit more cognizant of the situations we are in so that we can receive it and process it in the best way possible. Whether you are the perpetrator of a bullying moment or the recipient, the victim of a bullying moment. Leadership is so important there. That was what was running through my head when we were talking about micromanagement. Yeah. Vernon, done speaking.
Thank you, Vernon. Thank you, Animah. You raised a few really good points, and I was frantically typing and making notes. Earlier this year, I was facilitating a leadership program, and there were different generations in the session. So as everyone was sharing, I noticed that the younger generation were being shut down pretty quickly. So one of the questions I asked them was, would you like to give them the opportunity to share as well? And so they jokingly shared, and they said that, they've only really just started their work experience. What do they know? And so one thing I shared with them was, regardless of age and regardless of tenure in a role in an organization, it is no correlation to experience. You can be in a role for a shorter span of time and gain so much more experience than someone who has been in a role for, say, maybe 8 years? And someone in that room said, actually, could I share something? So this person had been working on a project for 8 months, and this person shared everything that they've learned in that 8 months. And, well, it basically silenced the whole room across the generations in the room. So that was something about, young people or, regardless of the generations, it's we don't know. And if we don't know, rather than judge, let's just be curious and ask and get to know instead, rather than come from a place of, I've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years, therefore I know more, I know better. There's always an opportunity to learn something new, to do something differently. So that was one thing. The part that really caught my attention was micromanaging. Animah and Vernon. So I can share many years ago, I was micromanaged so badly to a point where I had sleepless nights. I really couldn't sleep. I was so afraid at just the thought of going to work that I would break out in a fever and I would be physically ill. And when I was at work, I was so fearful of everything I did, everything I said, and everything I didn't do, and everything I didn't say, that when the end of the workday finally arrived, I was too exhausted to even enjoy what was left of the rest of the day. So micromanaging really takes a toll on people. And sometimes, to be fair, sometimes managers don't realize that that's what they're doing. There's this term I'm sure some of us are familiar with, as above, so below. A lot of these behaviors, traits are really carried forward from who we learned it from, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right way or it's the healthy way for the work culture. Another thing as well is, Vernon, you mentioned something about micromanaging at times being necessary. I will agree to that. Because when it comes to things in an organization, especially when it comes to more HR-related matters like performance management or PIP, performance improvement plans, sometimes that particular process calls for monitoring every task that an employee does, depending on which stage the employee is at for that performance improvement plan. And the aim is not to instill fear. I always say this to everybody that I speak to about performance management. The aim is not to instill fear in any way, shape, or form. The aim is to help the employee do better, perform better, so that they can clear that performance improvement plan and get back to track. That is the ultimate aim. However, in a lot of organizations, the approach taken for performance management is, I'm going to make you feel afraid. You did something wrong, therefore, this is the consequence, this is the repercussion, and you're paying for it. And the moment that happens, it instills fear. And when someone is fearful, they are not going to be performing well, full stop. If they aren't already performing at work, instilling fear is not going to make it any better for them. One other instance was when well, few instances actually, when employees used to reach out to me and ask me about performance management. They used to say, hey, Chevonne, we're not quite sure, is this actually like performance management or not? Because this is the situation. And in some instances, their performance management incidents were handled well. In other instances, they were not at all. They were being bullied. So I used to give them advice. And this was when I was a part of the HR team, not directly part of the HR team that's involved with employee relations. I just want to make that clear. But it's still under the HR umbrella. So when I received even more employees coming to me with these requests and consulting me and asking me for advice, I approached HR just to give them a heads up to say, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is what's happening. And I was informed, yeah, we have it under control. So I trusted them. You have it under control. Cool. Even more employees started coming to me and asking me for advice. And I was concerned for them because the numbers were increasing. Does that mean that we have more employees who are not performing, therefore being performance managed? That was the thought that crossed my mind. And whenever I would ask them, have you spoken with HR? They would tell me yes, and they would tell me exactly what HR told them. For anyone here who's joining us right now live or listening to this recording later on, this is in no way taking a stab at HR. I'm sharing my lived experience. The employees did not receive help from HR. And part of HR's role and responsibility is really to provide support to employees if they can't go to their managers and if they can't go to their colleagues or other managers. Who can they go to? And if someone is feeling bullied, it's already impacting their health, their mental health. Every state is impacted. And now if they cannot speak to someone, they feel isolated. That does not help them. Long story short, HR confronted me and HR said, you cannot advise them anymore because we just want them to do what they are told. And then things turned a little bit unpleasant because I said, if they're asking me for advice, these are the company policies and guidelines. I will advise them because it is our collective responsibility. And the moment I did that, only then did they start to take their role seriously. So it's an example of how just one person can make a difference. Sure, I put myself on the target board, but it really just takes one person to start making a difference. And it can make a difference if we're consistent about it and if we actually speak up and say something about it. This is Chevonne, and I'm pausing my mic for now.
Thanks, Chevonne. Wow, that's really interesting to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people have probably similar examples with maybe HR being less supportive. And I think that's simply because if the environment, the culture of the company is such, HR would so probably emulate that culture. And I think a lot of times it actually goes back to the executive, senior leadership. How are they, and as leaders, how are they setting the tone? Right. And, I often get people coming to me and saying, well, the problem is with a popular leader or a leader who is someone senior who is, bringing in a lot of revenue or whatever it is for the organization. And sometimes that kind of gives them an extra layer of protection. And this is where I want to go back to what we would consider the less obvious forms of bullying, especially in terms of what is the old style leadership traits. And, we've all heard of leaders who are very directive. Okay, this is what you have to do. And when pushed to the extreme, that can tip over into bullying, like do as I do, do as I say, follow my instructions, don't question me, just get it done. That's quite authoritarian, and the person may not be open to listening and receiving feedback. So people who work for someone like that may be a little bit more fearful. And I think also, we all go into meetings where, so there are meetings which are so exciting. Everyone's talking, a lot of people have things to say and so on, and it's vibrant. You can see all kinds of ideas coming out and so on. And then there are other meetings where you might have one or two people speaking and everybody else just sits there looking really disengaged, or well, I just have to be here. And I'm going to say this, I mean, I, like, Vernon and Chevonne, have worked in Malaysia and in quite a number of Malaysian companies. That's fairly common. So you just go to work to, you get work done. But people feel very disempowered because it's an authoritative style of leadership. So I wanted to name some of the things that happen in many organizations, whether in Malaysia, Asia, or, throughout the rest of the world, which we've kind of normalized, but is a form of bullying or harassment. So, I mean, another example I want to give is contacting people after work hours or on weekends or, at night, beyond what is a reasonable hour, I would consider. And even though it may be just something that might feel fairly innocuous, like, oh, have you done this, da 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 da, because, you got a meeting tomorrow, it's not respecting someone's personal time. I mean, we, especially as leaders, need to be a bit more efficient, that we're not disturbing people after hours. And the other thing, and this typically happens in law firms, is the dumping of work at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. at the end of the workday. Or can you get this done by tomorrow? Or even worse, it's 5 p.m. on a Friday. Can you have this in by Monday? There goes your entire weekend. And now, if it's really, really urgent, I get it. But if this happens a lot, that is actually a form of bullying. And especially if it happens to some people more than others, right? There is almost like a targeted, okay, let's give this person a tough time and the others don't have it. So unreasonable deadlines is one. Disturbing people after office hours is another, right? I think that's something to sort of think about. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is public criticism. I mean, I think we've all been in meetings or whatever where a leader or someone more senior criticizes a more junior person in front of everybody else. Now, sometimes the feedback may be necessary, but my question always is, does this have to be done in front of other people? Can they not have a one-on-one, right? So just wondering, if either of you wanted to add to these kind of things. But I've seen it happen so often. And the other thing, what's really sad, is that other leaders just allow it to come on, to continue. And I want to talk about something that's happened actually just a couple of days ago. A particular very senior executive in Malaysia had in the past during a virtual meeting witnessed, one of his CEOs publicly in the meeting bully another colleague, and he just laughed it off. Now, a few days ago, he was seen, and it's been covered actually in the news, receiving a massage with his shirt off during a meeting. And this is actually, I mean, when leaders do things like this, it really sets a very, very uncomfortable, inappropriate tone culture for everyone else. And it almost like says to everybody, hey, you can do this too. If you want to misbehave or do inappropriate things, well, if the leader's done it, it gives permission for others to misbehave. And it makes a lot of people who don't want to do that, not comfortable with that, it makes them feel unsafe. So it goes back into this toxic bullying culture. Chevonne, Vernon, you want to add anything to that, especially with this particular case?
Yeah, the situation. I need to dive deeper into the situation. Um, I thought it was really inappropriate for what happened, but at the same time, I mean, like, if I want to live by my mantra of curiosity before judgment, I'd like to know who was it that took the video and whether it was leaked with his permission? And if
Sorry,
so,
can I
what
just
was
say,
his intent?
Vernon, he
Yeah, sure.
posted it himself.
Ah, okay. So then,
It
what
wasn't
is he
leaked.
up to?
I know,
Yeah.
it's just really
What?
weird.
Yeah. So it is really weird. Was he trying to flex his muscle to say, I'm in a position where I can do these kinds of things and you'll just have to roll with it? And if so, it does say something about his leadership style, doesn't it? Yeah. That's my comment for now. I do have a lot more to say. I do want to say that it was inappropriate. He should have known better than to do something like that, especially when he posted it himself. I don't know. It's just weird. Okay. That's all I'll say for now. Thanks. Vernon done speaking.
This is Chevonne speaking. I think we're going to keep the comments about this particular situation as minimal as possible. For everybody who's joining us now and for everyone who will be listening to the session, Animah, Vernon, and I were chatting briefly about this yesterday. And to me, I do not use the word leader loosely. So in this instance, I will not call the person a leader. I will just refer to the person as, a person, right? There's a lot of thought process involved for things like this. Whether you're a manager, whether you're a leader, there is a thought process for better or for worse. To do something like this involved a thought process. To hire a masseuse, to get massaged, and only then to ask your team, are you comfortable with me having this done? Means that you're putting yourself and your needs first and your team second. That's what it tells me. Secondly, what's the message you're sending to your team? As above, so below. Whatever teams eventually do, however they behave, they are a reflection of the people that they report to. That's what I have to say about that particular incident, Animah. Was there anything else you wanted to add on to that?
Or do you want to talk anything about, this like criticizing colleagues in front of other colleagues in meetings and things like that? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. So the two other points you mentioned, contacting people after working hours. I will confidently say this is definitely common in Asia, where even if it's after working hours, it's considered quote unquote normal to be contacted. The dumping of work, scheduling meetings towards the end of the day, especially on a Friday, is also common in organizations. Setting unreasonable deadlines is also common. And I just want to say that for anyone who thinks this might be considered delegation, it is not. There is a certain process and clear steps to how something is delegated. Last minute things, not considering work-life balance, and the fact that after working hours, the person can do whatever they choose to do with their life is up to them. Criticizing in public is still very common, sadly. One thing I share in coaching sessions, in the sessions that I facilitate, is it's a general guideline. Praise people in public and give constructive feedback or criticism in private. When someone chooses to criticize in public, it's really just stating, I'm in charge. I have the power to say what I want to say, and I want you to know that. That's really what it ends up saying. That's the message it sends. This is Chevonne, and I'm pausing my mic.
Thanks, Chevonne. So it sounds like a power play, doesn't it, really? And I think one of the other things to acknowledge in terms of bullying is power dynamics. So when people are colleagues at the same level, maybe one criticizing the other and giving constructive criticism, especially when it's more private, that would be, fair enough, because the other person is unlikely to feel threatened, right, by this, or and they could probably have a candid conversation. But when you have a hierarchy and you have someone very senior, or there's power dynamics, when we talk about DEI, I mean, power dynamics isn't just about hierarchy. It can be power dynamics in terms of gender. So we're in a very male-dominated company, and there are few women. There is a power dynamic there. So, for example, the example we gave just now, a boss taking his shirt off and saying, "Well, I want a massage," and the female colleagues there, and he says, "Are you okay with this?" They're very unlikely to be able to say, "No, we're not okay," because there is a power dynamic there in terms of the gender difference, right? We still have men primarily in senior positions and women not quite there yet. Also, in terms of race and nationality, there's also that gender dynamic, power dynamic, right? Age, we've talked about age a lot, right? So younger people are more likely to be silent. And that's really uh, that's such a shame to see, because I think younger people have so much. First of all, they've got incredible energy, right? Us older folk can get quite jaded and all that. And if we're not giving them that space to be able to really contribute, share their ideas without being dismissed and shut down or being told, well, what do you know? I've been doing this for 20 years. And I think one of the things you said, Chevonne, was listening. And I do feel that the more we if we feel that urge to say, well, what do you know? Why don't we just stop that? We pause. We go, you know what? I'm going to shove that aside, my judgment. I'm going to shove it aside. I'm just going to listen. And for me, when I first started doing this, probably about 10 years ago, it was very hard at first, because that's when I started doing coaching. I learned it when I was in-house. And my own team noticed a difference, because before that, I used to be a bit more of the authoritarian leader, that I would give instructions and I would be more directive. And then when I learned a little bit, when I became a coach, it was more like, okay, I would, I kind of knew where I wanted them to go, but I wouldn't say, do this. I would basically say, well, what do you think about this situation? How should we? And sometimes, I thought I knew the answer. A lot of the times, their answers were better than anything I would have thought of. So the thing is that when we give people the space to come up with solutions, we need to accept that we don't know everything, right? And often we should be hiring people smarter than ourselves too, or people who have very different disciplines, background, knowledge, whatever, because what they then do is give us different perspectives, things that we may not have seen before. And this is why also, the whole conversation around DEI is really, really important, because when you have very diverse perspectives from people who are very different to us. I mean, the joke I always said is, at one point HR came to me because we realized that our birthdays in my team were all around the same time of the year, and we were all basically Sagittarians, and that was not a very healthy thing. We were not diverse, right? So then we started, accepting different zodiac signs. But that's just a funny example. And it made me realize, was I hiring people who were like me? And that's not a good thing, actually. We should be really open to different perspectives, listening to different ideas. So I think coming back to this the bullying angle, I think a lot of it is coming from what we've normalized, especially the older ones. And I'd see me, Vernon, Chevonne, probably a little bit. Chevonne, you're younger. But we've been taught certain ways, and I think that just does not work in today's world. And I think the older generation, and I would say this is Gen X and the boomers, we need to actually learn to let go and trust, and sort of step back, because they're amazing. The people who come after us are incredible, right? So when we do that, you'll see this whole bullying thing moves, right? It doesn't. We are already becoming more secure in ourselves, and the people who work with us also feel empowered. So, like you said, Chevonne, as above, so below. They won't take on our negative attributes, right? So the law firm mentality I started off with has completely dropped away from me. And it's really funny, because now when I sometimes go back into various, law firms, legal profession and so on, it comes back to me like, oh my God, has it not changed from 20 years ago, right? So yeah, I think we'll stop there. Vernon, do we want to invite people to maybe share their thoughts? We've been speaking. a lot.
Yeah, it would be great to have people come up on stage.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you'd like to contribute to the conversation. Anything that you've heard or any kind of like issues that you'd like to address coming up from the conversations that Animah and Chevonne and myself have been having. Please raise your hand and Animah will bring you up. Yeah, this whole the title, When Leadership Turns into Bullying, just from what has been said, I just like to summarize. I think leadership turns into bullying when fear has to be part of the equation, when domination has to be part of the equation, when silencing people so that they do not have an opportunity to voice their concerns, that is when part of the equation. Hence, I guess, the Speaking Up Network, by its very notion of promoting speaking up culture, definitely has an essential role to play in a way either reducing or eliminating bullying and promoting psychological safety in the workplace. Because sometimes and very often, and I've been guilty of it, we forget that the people we work with also have feelings and have feelings and sensitivities and ambitions like us, their superiors, and we can move forward together without having to resort to bullying, to creating an environment of fear and anxiety and all those horrible things that makes one have sleepless nights, the way Chevonne had earlier described. I've been in that position too when I moved to another country to work for an ad agency. And in the space of like less than 1 year, I worked under 3 different creative directors who were all bullies and who probably didn't last very long because they were. Because it was really quite a frightful atmosphere of backstabbing and political intrigue and all the horrible things that makes a work environment quite toxic and a living nightmare, so to speak. So after 10 months, I resigned and began my work from home career, so to speak. And I have no regrets about that, because eventually we all will prefer to work at home and to our own. We'll bring our talents elsewhere. So this is the thing that management and leaders of today need to take stock of, that the world is really competitive, that expediency isn't the answer to everything, that we are stronger when we move forward together, looking out for each other and being open and curious to what other people can bring to the table. Yeah. So has anybody raised their hands? Nobody's raising their hands?
No, nobody's raised their hands. So either
Not yet. Not yet, no.
so I see some familiar faces. Okay, Sandy.
There we go.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, hang on. Let me bring you up. Wait, how do I do this? Just a second. Allow to speak.
Yes, Sandy, wonderful to have you with us again.
Okay, there she is. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
You need to unmute, Sandy. Look for the unmute button. Sometimes you forget with this LinkedIn Live audio. So you're still not coming through, Sandy. We're not hearing anything. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Vernon.
Okay.
Sandy, if you're joining us from your mobile phone, the mute and unmute button should be on the bottom right hand of your screen.
Okay, I think we've lost her. Sometimes this thing can be glitchy. Sandy, you want to try joining again? Anybody else? I see some familiar faces in the workplace bullying space. Jonathan, Judy, also Nick. Anybody wanna join and speak?
We'd love to hear from you.
When I say workplace bullying space, I basically mean advocates addressing workplace bullying. I don't mean the bullies. I get that. But,
I just want to share something with you.
yeah.
I mean, So I left mainstream advertising like in 5,000 years ago, and like after like 15 years, I bumped into vendors and project partners, and one thing that I found out was that people were afraid of me, and that really shocked me. That yeah, and it was said in a very kind of like they thought they'd share with me that they were afraid of me. And that kind of like broke my heart to think that, oh my God, I was in projects where people were afraid of me. Yeah, it was kind of like a mind changer, game changer for me in being more aware of how I would operate in kind of like collaborative workspaces. Sandy's back. Wonderful.
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Hi,
I think you
Sandy.
can hear me now. Is that
Yes,
correct?
we can.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I swapped from my phone to my main laptop and it seemed to want to let me in.
Wonderful.
Quickly, because I can see the clock ticking. This is a very interesting topic. I'm minded that I'm speaking to you all from the UK, and I'm not sure how many other people are calling from UK. So, and I'm also speaking because I come from an industry. I work in construction and engineering, as some of you know, and that is known as an industry seen as really pretty darn aggressive and with an ingrained bullying culture. But I'm minded in listening to Aminah's experience and the comparisons with the law is that when I was doing my master's in construction law and arbitration at King's College London, my thesis was looking at the impact of the law on conflict and dispute in the industry, and came to the conclusion that because we have an adversarial legal system, that was a major contributing issue around how work was done. And it seems to filter in. So it's very interesting to hear the experience of bullying in the legal context when bullying and bad behavior is regarded primarily as happening in a non-traditional career. So I think that was one of the reasons why when I completed my master's and I became a member of the arbitrators, I also trained as a mediator. And I think it's mediation and the approach to mediation and using it as a management skill for the management of conflict rather than simply the resolution of dispute can go a long way in managing the culture that can result in what is seen as bullying. So that's the first point, looking at it from a different industry. The second point is I'm looking at it very much as being an employer rather than a member of a large corporate or a large legal practice. And I was an employer for many years and felt that we were doing a reasonable job. What I missed on one particular occasion was the bullying of my staff by another member of staff. And that was a management failure on my part, not understanding or spotting how her behavior, which was driven by a feeling of inferiority, had not been spotted by me in recognizing the value of valuing everybody regardless of where they came from. So that was a sort of equality, diversity and inclusion issue around people's competencies. And finally, a last comment is that I also marked down companies who came to me to present or promote their services if they didn't allow everybody in their own group to speak. And it was fascinating how often, and this picks up Amina's comments about the guys at the top running the show. And I always made a point of inviting the silent person who'd sat there throughout to speak as well. And that is a form of bullying. I'll leave it at that because I'm conscious of the clock ticking and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but just three slightly different views on the same very important topic. This is Sandy Rees-Jones finishing.
Thank you, Sandy. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And I think one of the things that really stuns people when I tell them is, so I moved from the legal profession to the oil and gas industry. And I tell people, oh my God, the oil and gas industry is such a kinder place to be. and they're more respectful of women too, right? And that would just stun people because that was not, you know, what was expected. But maybe also because I joined larger, you know, corporates. It's not the case throughout, but I would say as a whole, probably the industry is a bit better than the legal profession. And you're absolutely right. This adversarial nature that we just love to argue and get one better up than the other. And I think that pervades all elements of our, you know, our being. I think that, and that's how lawyers are trained. And being able to move away from that is quite difficult. Thanks, Sandy. I think there was another thing you said. I think it will come back to me that really like, oh my God, yes. But I think Judy, it's nice to hear.
Hi, Animah. How are you? Hi, Vernon, Chevonne, and Sandy, and everyone that's listening. I think this is a very important conversation because I think if psychological, which I prefer to call than bullying, because I think we need to move away from the word bullying because it deflects from the seriousness of what's actually going on, which is psychological abuse, harassment, and violence. But I think this is such a good chat because I think awareness has to come from leadership, and knowledge is power. And this is a powerful panel of resources and solutions. And it's so important to look at leadership, as safety has to come from the top down. There has to be a leadership culture of safety and well-being in the workplace, which includes diversity, equality, and inclusion. So I think it has to start with leadership to resolve this inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. And that's basically just what I wanted to say. So thanks.
Thank you, Judy. It's wonderful to hear you. And for everybody's knowledge as well, I mean, Judy Kamodi is part of the work. What do we call ourselves? Workplace Bullying Awareness group that Linda has been, you know, leading for a few years now. So it's a pleasure. And I know you were speaking yesterday as well. So if anyone looks for the hashtag Workplace Bullying Awareness Week, you'll find loads of people on LinkedIn sharing resources and talking about that. And of course, we've also got Jonathan Wilson in the audience, who is I think every day posts about workplace bullying. So he's got some very compelling stories as well. Does anybody else want to join us before we wrap up? Well, we're on the hour, right, Vernon? Shall we keep it at that?
Yes, indeed. Just based on the recording, yeah, just on the hour, exactly. Wonderful.
I want to thank Vernon because he's got a bit of a sore throat, if you couldn't tell, and also if you hear his windy background, I know there's a storm in Kuala Lumpur. Okay, we've got somebody who's raised their hands. Is it? No. Okay, so really thank you, Vernon. Despite your throat, being here today and speaking with us, and so glad as well for Chevonne joining us. Michael, okay, I'm going to bring Michael up. Michael's an incredible supporter here. Michael Yin. Hold on. Oops, have we... there you are. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes. Thank you for the room. I think the problem with I think from what has been discussed about this was that a lot of times these leaders tend to get away with bullying, and it has not been very helpful in a sense. And I think the problem is that there is a lack of understanding on, you know, good human resource and managing governance practices across the world. And we have seen what happened when this is left unchecked, because it is, especially for investors, if they really want to know whether a business is viable, they need to really look at who the leaders are and whether they have, you know, have demonstrated that kind of leadership that is required. And because of that, I think there's a need to kind of have a very comprehensive thought process and checklist in assessing them before even considering whether they are investable. Because in the end, it's not just about whether money talks, but I've seen enough cases where such abuses has happened. So and in the end, it's a tragic story in a way because it has happened too many times. I can share a personal example. There was a time I used to work for an investment firm, and every Monday was a fearful day for everyone because we will all get shocked at, and people do cry after they finish the meeting. So it is a very horrifying thing. Fortunately or unfortunately, that company eventually went defunct because from what I heard was that no one dares to go to the workplace, and because of the way they manage companies, they end up when either going insolvent or basically bankruptcy, or and the leader, the boss who kept shouting at us eventually got into a number of litigation with investors because they also asking why what happened, So I think we are seeing that there is a need for better governance. I mean, we are seeing that in what happened with WeWork, with FTX, with all these companies, and we need to keep asking ourselves is whether, are we, confusing confidence and charisma with competency? And until then, I think we will still continue to have all these scandals in the workplace. In terms of enforcement, I do feel that the government can do very little because most of the time they consider this a civil case rather than a criminal case. So we need to find a way to kind of push for ways where we can make it a criminal, to criminalize this kind of abuses. Because if we don't do that, what will happen is that they will continue to get away, and for a lot of these victims, legal lawsuits are not possible for them because they don't have the money to. So I think that is my thoughts on this.
Yeah.
And yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Michael. I think the point about investors is very important. You mentioned WeWork and other examples, and there's a fine line. So Jonathan and I remember some years ago we gave a talk about, I think, where we were connecting workplace bullying to unethical behavior, and things could happen and go wrong in a more sort of toxic bullying culture because people would be afraid to speak up and raise these issues. And it's really important for the executive, for the board to know when things are going wrong, and so that they can address it and deal with it. And if the culture is one where there are a number of bullies, especially in senior positions, it's actually hard for very important, vital information to be brought to the board, for example. So for me, investors need to be all over this, in that they need to be, if there are some senior people who are shown to be bullies or harassers in some way, they need to be removed, even though they could be, let's say, like, was it Travis, what's it, of Uber, right? Kalanick. The board moved him because even though he was the founder of Uber, his own behavior was such that it was creating a hostile environment, which would, of course, mean that the company would be in trouble. So when investors and boards especially are more they're more aware of this and how it impacts the business. I mean, it's always, unfortunately, at the end of the day, about the bottom line, right? They need to take things like bullying seriously. I would not, I think when it comes to criminal, that's only if it's very serious abuse, or exploitation, which borders into the existing laws in many countries anyway. I would never suggest making bullying or simple bullying a criminal offense, because actually the danger is that it drives reporting underground. But really, if the focus is from cultures and leadership and making it an exception rather than normalizing the bullying behaviors we have today. But abuse is different. I mean, that definitely in some ways, if you're talking about threatening, intimidation, a lot of that is actually criminal. So I'm talking about the less obvious signs of bullying. But so I think Vernon is there. Shall we wrap this up, because we've been going on for a while now? Yeah.
Yep, 1 hour and almost 10 minutes, more than an hour, definitely. If there is nobody else who would like to come up to speak, yeah, we could round up by doing a round ribbon with everybody kind of putting in their closing thoughts on the issue. And by the way, this is the Sun Session Speaking Up Network. Sun stands for the Speaking Up Network sessions. And we have it every Thursday, except that over the last few weeks, we've been out of action because of various commitments and health issues. Yep. So, but it's every Thursday, and we're either here on LinkedIn, sometimes on Clubhouse, but we will usually promote where we are maybe a couple of days just before, but it's always on Thursdays, so look out for us.
All okay. Right. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Let's do the round. I'd like to hear from Judy, who's still with us here on stage. Any last thoughts about
Yes, Vernon and Animah, Chevonne and Michael, the last speaker. I just want to say thanks for having this conversation. That this room has been brilliant, because a thought has come into my mind from listening to everyone, that leadership can hurt. And that is actually we know that's not supposed to happen. So thank you for having the conversation. And we really need to examine leadership in companies and eradicate the bullying in leadership. So that's what I got from this wonderful room. So thank you very much. It was a great room. Thank you.
Look forward to having you in our future rooms, Judy. Wonderful. Chevonne, closing thoughts?
Thanks, Vernon. My closing thought would be unlearning and relearning to change a workplace culture isn't easy, but it can definitely happen. Pausing my mic.
Thanks, Chevonne. Yeah. Well, you're on that mission, aren't you? Wonderful. So power to you. Michael, last thoughts?
Yes. First of all, thank you for the room again. I think my thoughts on this was that I think because for me personally, I have seen a lot of this I have seen suicides because of this as well, and also a lot of untold suffering from all these abuses before. So hence my stand on that. But I do agree that maybe we could set a boundary and make sure that there is more legal support for people who have suffered this kind of bullying, because like I say, they do not have the resources to do so, and it will help a long way in creating a more positive and inclusive workforce. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I think that's really sobering what you just said, that that workplace bullying can get to a point of somebody somewhere taking their own lives, and it has happened. We know that, yeah, or driving ourselves to bad health and debilitating ourselves with depression and stuff like that. As some of us have shared, it has happened to we some of us know how that has happened before. Yep. Thanks, Michael. Animah?
Just thinking, I mean, in terms of what Michael has said about suicide and also the criminal side, actually, there was French Telecom, which is now Orange. Their senior executives, including the former CEO, were charged criminally because they had created such a hostile environment in French Telecom that a number of people did commit suicide, employees. So that, I mean, you want to Google that, you can find that case. And I think that really shook up, especially people in Europe and France, that, right? There is some form of liability. In this case, criminal liability. They didn't go to jail in the end, but they were actually charged and convicted, I believe. Yes, they were convicted. So this really kind of is a wake up call to people who are leading, that if you fail to address harm in your company, you will be on the line in some ways. And I think only France is probably the country that's actually done this, and maybe this is something for others to. So thanks for raising that, Michael. And I think one of the things is most of us don't intentionally want to hurt anybody, and but we're so unaware of how our own behavior can do this. And what I would suggest, very much what Chevonne said at the start, which is about that we need to be listening, and we need to be inviting feedback and being receptive to feedback when people tell us things that we don't want to hear because it's about us. But we have to open up and say, look, be open to change. I think the newer style of leaders are doing that. And for those of us who are older, I think old dogs can learn new tricks, and we should do that. So thank you. I want to thank, my co-speaker here, Chevonne, partner in crime, because it's been a while, I think, since we've shared the same stage, and it was just so wonderful having you with us, Chevonne. So I really want to appreciate. And earlier, Sandy, Judy, and Michael for joining us and sharing your views as well. And of course, my intrepid host. Am I using the right word? Yes, thank you. So back to you, Vernon. I think Chevonne also wants to add something. And I'm done speaking. Thank you.
What does Chevonne want to add?
Chevonne would like to say thank you very much, Animah and Vernon. Vernon, thank you for being here, considering you're not feeling well and your throat is scratchy. I appreciate that. Thank you to Sandy, Judy, and Michael for sharing with us, and to everyone who joined us on the session to lean in and listen. And those of you who are still with us, Irene, B, hi B, Nav, hi Nick, Erica, Jonathan, Nikki, Sun Li Wei, Noma, Pallavi, Manila, Leslie, and Selena and Miranda, who just joined us. I hope I said all of your names right. Animah and Vernon, I absolutely enjoyed the session. I'm passionate about topics like this. Thank you to all of you. And this is Chevonne, pausing my mic for the evening.
I just realized I missed you out before I went to Animah. I'm so sorry. The decongestants are getting to my head. Okay, so sorry about that, Chevonne. You do know I love you.
I love you too, Vernon. You didn't miss me out. I just wanted to add
okay.
Thank you, because I did give my one-liner to summarize. You didn't miss me out. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah, see, my head's really spinning. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having all of you here with us in the Thursdays ahead. And here is us from the Speaking Up Network, Animah Kosai and myself, and all of us on stage, wishing you a really good rest of the day ahead.